For centuries, whispers have claimed that Mary Magdalene carried a secret the Church could never allow. A bloodline. A legacy tied to the Holy Grail, and even to the dragons of myth. That single idea of a woman carrying a forbidden legacy inspired novels, sparked conspiracies, and unsettled faith for generations. But these whispers didn't appear out of nowhere. They grew from fragments of history, from myths older than Christianity itself, from caves in southern France, and from the imagination of a church terrified of who Mary Magdalene was. So tonight, on Vortex Mythology, we're not asking what's true or false. We're asking what the stories themselves reveal. Because sometimes, the greatest secrets aren't hidden in facts, but in the power of symbols, and in the fear of those who tried to silence them. To understand why Mary Magdalene became so magnetic to myth, we need to return to the earliest records. The canonical Gospels describe her with a quiet but unshakable presence. Mary Magdalene is there at the crucifixion, where most others fled. She's there at the tomb, where despair hangs over the disciples like a shroud. And she's the very first to encounter the risen Christ, chosen, it seems, to witness the greatest revelation in Christian history. But the official record grows thin. Beyond those scenes, the New Testament gives us little more than silence. Into this silence, centuries of speculation have poured. Later traditions filled in the gaps. Legends tell of Mary's journey to Provence, France, where she had lived out her days in contemplation inside a cave at St. Baume. Her image shifts, not merely a follower, but an independent, wealthy, and spiritually powerful woman who unsettled the patriarchal order of the time. Picture this figure for a moment. A woman who walked alongside Christ, unafraid to lead, remembered as both visionary and aesthetic. For the men who built the early church, she was already too much, and in such fertile ground, myths would grow like wildfire. She was a woman of wealth, independence, and unsettling spiritual authority. And it's here that her story begins to blur into something larger. First appearing in the medieval romances of Crétin d'Etrars and Wolfram von Eschenbach, the Grail was never one thing. Sometimes it was a chalice, other times a dish, a stone, or a vessel of divine grace. Always, it shimmered with mystery. But in later interpretations, the Grail becomes something far more explosive. Not an object, but a symbol. Not a cup, but a lineage. And at the center of the shift stood Mary Magdalene. In this retelling, the Grail was Mary herself, bearer of secret knowledge, sacred union, perhaps even the womb that carried a bloodline from Christ. Suddenly, the quest for the Grail was no longer about knights chasing relics. It was about uncovering a legacy deliberately hidden. From medieval poetry to modern novels like the Da Vinci Code, Magdalene's presence in Grail lore has become inseparable. Every time her name is whispered alongside the Grail, the same questions arise. What power lies in her story? And why was it considered too dangerous to preserve in plain sight? And yet, the Grail was only one layer. From the deeper recesses of myth, Mary's legacy is tied to an even older symbol, one that breathes fire and coils in shadows: the dragon. In the secret language of historic traditions, whispers tell of the dragon bloodline, a lineage said to flow not through kings or conquerors, but from Jesus and Mary Magdalene themselves. And yet, one question rises above them all. Why a dragon? The dragon has always been more than a monster. On one side, it is chaos and destruction, a beast to be slain by saints and heroes. But turn the symbol, and you see something else: fertility, sovereignty, and the raw, coiled force of creation. For millennia, serpent and dragon goddesses, Sophia, Tiamat, and Ashura, carried this mantle, embodying the untamed feminine power of life itself. To link Mary Magdalene to the dragon was to place her in this ancient current of divine, unstoppable energy. Even Europe's royal houses were not immune to its pull. Some claimed descent from dragon blood, presenting themselves as heirs of an elemental power. Their veins carrying not just noble lineage, but the fire of sovereignty itself. But if such a claim reached further back, beyond myth, to the Magdalene herself, what kind of authority would that bestow? Lawrence Gardner's Bloodline of the Holy Grail dives into these possibilities, suggesting that hidden dynasties safeguarded this legacy for centuries. Whether we read it as literal genealogy or a symbolic myth, the dragon bloodline strikes at the heart of what the church feared most: the sacred fused with the feminine, a vitality that could never be caged. But if myth cast Magdalene as a dragon, the earliest texts dared to paint her in another light, as the very interpreter of mysteries too profound for most to grasp. The Gnostic Gospels, long buried and branded heretical, give us a startling different picture of Magdalene. In the Gospel of Mary, she emerges as a visionary. She recounts the soul's journey beyond cosmic powers, lifting her fellow disciples when they falter in despair. Peter resists her, unable to accept a woman's authority, yet her words remain luminous, filled with courage and wisdom. In Pistis, Sophia, she appears again, this time as the most perceptive of Jesus' disciples, the one who understands his teachings best, the one who dares to ask questions that no one else dares to voice. Over and over, Magdalene becomes the bearer of secret knowledge. From there, it's a short step for imagination to transform secret teachings into secret bloodlines. If she carried truths hidden from the apostles, why not also a lineage hidden from the church? Gnostic texts lit the spark, and legends fanned it into flame. Those writings gave her a voice, but Europe gave her a stage. And nowhere did her legend take deeper root than in southern France, in caves, in dragon myths, and in whispered traditions. According to medieval tradition, Mary Magdalene arrived in Provence by boat, carried by Providence to the shores of southern France. From there, she retreated into a cave at St. Baume, where she lived in solitude and prayer until her death. The cave itself became a symbol, dark, hidden, womb-like, a place where secrets gestate. Pilgrims still climb the path to her grotto, tracing the echoes of her story in stone and silence. Her sister Martha is tied to another legend, the dragon Tarasque, which she subdued in the town of Tarascon. Here, the Magdalene legacy fuses with local lore. The dragon becomes the guardian of treasure, of hidden lineage, of mysteries only the brave may claim. And so, southern France grew into the heartland of Magdalene devotion, from the Grail romances of medieval poets to whispered tales of royal houses claiming descent from her bloodline. Provence became a landscape where saints, dragons, and the Grail merged into one. But why would such myths endure? Why would they threaten the church so deeply that centuries of suppression followed? The answer lies in what her story symbolized, an alternative to the very order the church had built. The danger was never just about Mary as a woman, it was about what she represented. If Magdalene carried hidden knowledge, then authority was not confined to Peter. If she carried a bloodline, then divine inheritance was not locked within the walls of Rome. The legends of grails and dragons suggested a continuity of power beyond patriarchal control, an unbroken thread tying Christ to the feminine, to wisdom, to creation itself. The church feared not simply myth, but rebellion, a story that placed Mary at the center, undermined centuries of hierarchy. A bloodline, real or imagined, suggested that flesh and blood, not institutions, carried divine right. The dragon myths in particular embodied everything the church sought to tame: sexuality, wisdom, feminine power, the raw energy of nature. To suppress Mary was to suppress these forces. They made her a sinner, so her power would vanish. And yet, despite sermons, rewritings, and condemnations, the myths endured, because what is suppressed often becomes all the more powerful. And so we return to the heart of the mystery, not with answers, but with questions that continue to burn centuries later. You may have your own theories and thoughts, yet ultimately no firm conclusions are necessarily needed, because the power of the Magdalene bloodline lies in its mystery. These stories endure not because they are proven, but because they touch something deeper: the fear of women's authority, the allure of the divine feminine, the pull of hidden knowledge. So we ask again, was she the mother of a forbidden lineage? Or the woman of dragons, carrying an ancient power the church could never silence? Her story reminds us of one truth: power buried is never gone. It always rises again. If you want to keep uncovering these hidden histories, like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell, because every mystery leads to the next.